David Bowie was born David Robert Jones on January 8, 1947, in Brixton, London, England. From a young age, he showed a deep fascination with music and art. At just 13, he picked up the saxophone, inspired by jazz legends. Growing up in post-war Britain, he was surrounded by cultural change from the rise of rock and roll to the swinging London scene. But it wasn't just music. Bowie was a dreamer. He loved theater, mime, and fashion, elements that would later fuse into his groundbreaking artistry. By his teenage years, Bowie was already performing in local bands, but he knew he was destined for something much bigger. In the late 1960s, David Bowie began experimenting with new sounds and identities. But it was the early 1970s that changed everything. In 1972, Bowie introduced the world to his most iconic alter ego, Ziggy Stardust, a flamboyant, otherworldly rock star from outer space. His album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars wasn't just music, it was theater, fashion, and rebellion all rolled into one. With glitter, bold costumes, and androgynous style, Bowie challenged social norms and redefined what it meant to be a rock star. Songs like Starman, Suffragette City, and Rock and Roll Suicide made Bowie a cultural icon almost overnight. Concerts turned into experiences, and Ziggy became a voice for outsiders, misfits, and dreamers everywhere. By 1973, Bowie shocked fans when he retired Ziggy on stage, proving he wasn't just a rock star, he was a master of reinvention. After the glam rock explosion of Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie entered one of his most experimental and transformative periods. By the mid-1970s, Bowie had adopted the persona of the Thin White Duke, a darker, stylish, and enigmatic character. This was showcased in his 1976 album Station to Station, blending funk, soul, and electronic influences. But it was Bowie's move to Berlin, Germany, that marked a turning point. Escaping the chaos of fame and substance struggles, he immersed himself in art, film, and avant-garde music. Teaming up with producer Brian Eno, Bowie released the legendary Berlin trilogy, Low 1977, Heroes 1977, Lodger 1979. These albums pushed boundaries with ambient sounds, electronic textures, and poetic lyrics. The anthem Heroes became one of Bowie's most timeless tracks, symbolizing resilience and love against all odds. This era cemented Bowie as not just a rock star, but an artistic pioneer, constantly redefining music and culture. The 1980s catapulted David Bowie into a whole new dimension of success. In 1983, he released the album Let's Dance, produced by Nile Rodgers of Chic. The title track, along with Modern Love and China Girl, became global hits, dominating charts worldwide. This album introduced Bowie to a new mainstream audience, blending rock with dance and pop influences. His charisma and sharp fashion sense made him a constant figure on MTV, which was just beginning to shape pop culture. During this decade, Bowie also explored acting more deeply. He starred in films such as The Hunger, 1983, Labyrinth, 1986, where he played the Goblin King, and Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983, proving he was more than just a musician. By the mid-80s, Bowie was performing massive stadium tour, including Live Aid in 1985, where his performance helped raise millions for famine relief. Though some critics felt the 80s were more commercial than his experimental work, Bowie's global fame was undeniable. He had become a true megastar, inspiring a new generation of artists. The 1990s saw David Bowie return to his risk-taking roots, experimenting with new sounds and styles while collaborating with emerging artists. In 1993, he released Black Tie White Noise, blending jazz, soul, and electronic music. 2 years later, Bowie dropped Outside 1995, created with longtime collaborator Brian Eno. The album dove into industrial and experimental rock, showing he was still fearless in pushing boundaries. Bowie also embraced the internet era early. In 1996, he became one of the first major artists to release a single telling lies online. By 1998, he launched BowieNet, his own internet service provider and fan community, something unheard of at the time. During this decade, both collaborated with younger bands and artists like Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, Placebo, and even dabbled in drum and bass music. He constantly reinvented himself, refusing to stay trapped by the classic rock label. In 1997, he released Earthling, a bold album inspired by electronic and jungle beats, complete with his trademark futuristic style. The 1990s proved that Bowie wasn't just a legend of the past. He was still shaping the future of music and technology. The early 2000s brought a mix of creativity and challenges for David Bowie. In 2002, he released Heathen, an album praised for its depth and maturity, followed by Reality 2003, which showed his continued ability to evolve. He toured extensively during this time, reminding the world of his magnetic stage presence. However, in 2004, during his Reality tour, Bowie suffered a serious heart attack after a performance in Germany. This forced him to undergo emergency surgery and step away from touring. For nearly a decade afterward, Bowie lived largely out of the spotlight. Fans wondered if he had quietly retired from music. During these years, he focused on his health, family, and private life with his wife, supermodel Iman, and their daughter, Alexandria. But in 2013, Bowie shocked the world with a surprise comeback. Without any prior announcement, he released the next day his first studio album in 10 years. It debuted to critical acclaim, proving that his artistic fire still burned brightly. The 2000s were a decade of reflection, recovery, and rebirth, setting the stage for his powerful and final artistic chapter. The 2010s became the most poignant chapter in David Bowie's life and career. In 2016, on his 69th birthday, Bowie released Black Star, an album unlike anything he had done before. Experimental, haunting, and deeply layered, it was full of symbolism about life, death, and transformation. Just 2 days later, the world was stunned by the news. David Bowie had passed away after a private 18-month battle with liver cancer. His death shocked fans, as few outside his inner circle even knew he was ill. Black Star instantly became more than just music. It was Bowie's farewell gift, a carefully crafted artistic statement that allowed him to leave on his own terms. Songs like Lazarus felt like messages from beyond, solidifying his reputation as an artist who turned even death into art. Bowie's passing left a void in the music world, but his influence remained everywhere. From fashion to film, rock to pop, electronic to hip-hop, countless artists cited him as their greatest inspiration. By the end of the 2010s, Bowie's legacy was firmly cemented, not just as a musician, but as a cultural revolutionary who challenged identity, art, and society itself. At the time of his passing, in 2016, David Bowie's net worth was estimated at around $130 million. His earnings came not only from his massive music catalog, but also from investments, art collections, and his revolutionary Bowie bonds, which allowed him to securitize future royalties. Unlike many rock stars, Bowie lived with elegance and privacy. His final years were spent in New York City with his wife, supermodel Iman, and their daughter, Alexandria. Despite his global fame, he often walked the streets of Manhattan unnoticed, enjoying art galleries, books, and quiet family life. Bowie was also a visionary investor in art. His personal collection included pieces by Jean-Michel Basquiat and Damien Hirst. In 2016, shortly after his passing, his art collection alone fetched more than $40 million at auction. But more than wealth, Bowie left behind a legacy of reinvention. He proved that music was not just entertainment, but a living form of art, where identity could be fluid, fashion could be fearless, and boundaries could always be broken. From Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, from Space Oddity to Black Star, Bowie created a universe that inspired generations of artists and fans alike. Today, he is remembered not just as one of the greatest musicians of all time, but as a cultural icon whose influence on music, style, and creativity will live forever.